Hello everyone, I'm Rick Edwards. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Richmond. Today we're going to be doing our 2025 year in review, crime briefing. We're also going to update the community on some topics that we've been asked about and taking this opportunity to make those updates. So first, as always, I'll start with my command staff. There have been some changes in that, Deputy Chief Sidney Collier is now in charge of patrol services. Deputy Chief Sybil Elmine Jones has been moved to the support services. Deputy Chief Albert Stokes, sorry to say, is staying at business services, so he didn't get a new job this year. We also can announce the hiring of Director John Bridges, who is the director of our strategic implementation. Major Ronnie Armstead's transitioning to Patrol Services Area 1. Major Adrian Gardner is in Business Services. Major Daryl Goins is in Patrol Service Area 2. And then Major Keyshawn Mans has transitioned to Support Services. So that's our senior command staff. So as many of you know, we had an officer-involved shooting on January 17th in the 300 block of East Belt Boulevard. We're here to provide a bit of an update. So the individual who was shot, Thomas Alexander, age 41 of Richmond, is now in custody. He was wounded during that exchange. Thankfully, he survived. We have charged him with possession of a firearm by a previously convicted felon. We anticipate additional charges later. Today, we'll be naming the officers who were involved. So both officers work in the patrol division of 2nd Precinct. So Officer Miguel Reyes has 5 years of service with RPD, and Officer Antonio Fitzpatrick has 3 years of service. Both officers discharged their weapons during this. And as you know, the process, they are on paid administrative leave at this point. We are completing our investigation. We will provide all evidence we have to the Richmond Commonwealth's Attorney's Office for their review to determine if a crime occurred. Once that determination has been made, it will come back to the Richmond Police Department for an internal affairs review where we will attempt to determine if any policies were violated. That's an update on that case. So I got to give credit to CBS. James told me I'll get in trouble if I don't say this is CBS's reporting, but I think it's helpful for us to just kind of show this clip and then talk about it a little bit because we're being asked a lot about it.
A special tactical team.
Richmond Police, search warrant, 2350 Halifax, don't look on the head, Thomas man.
Moves in on a house on Halifax Street. After learning about this live social media video where you can see a man ripping off rounds in front of a home, the chief of police warned Richmonders not to do it.
Using your firearm to celebrate the New Year is inappropriate and can cause real-world harm. So not everyone listened to my admonition, and we talked about the fact in that press conference, which took place the day before New Year's Eve, that this year we were not only going to be out there and about, we're always doing that. Myself and my command staff were out and about, working with the officers on New Year's Eve. But we were going to not only make arrests that night, but use our technology to follow up on violators days and even over a week later to make arrests, and we have some significant updates. So everyone, we heard a lot about this case. Mr. William McGriff was charged the very next day. Within hours, people sent this video to us where he posted it himself. And within hours, we're executing a search warrant on his residence. And I want to say, not only did we find what we believe the gun that was used in that video, we collected cartridge casings from the yard, and we will be testing that against the gun we recovered. And, we'll see if additional charges apply. But this was just the most obvious example of that of New Year's Eve, but not the sole one. And I'll tell you why we did this year differently. I wanted to come out affirmatively and talk to the community about the dangers of this. I wanted to ensure that people knew that we would be following up on these cases because in October we conducted a community walk in this very neighborhood with Ms. Trammell and City Council and all of our officers like we always do. And Oak Grove is a neighborhood, Belmead, these are neighborhoods with single-family homes, a lot of seniors live there, and we heard it. Our officers heard it, and certainly I heard it, that our community was upset about gunfire they hear at night. They wanted us to do something about it. They certainly wanted to do something about New Year's Eve, and I promised that we would do that. And I know that we talk about community policing a lot in this city, and I'm a big believer in that, but a lot of people think that community policing is just about barbecues and walks and pop-up events, and that's part of it. Part of it is also listening intently to what our citizens want from their police department, and this is an example of that. So we had our street crimes unit conduct these investigations after the fact. So we charged 11 people, 6 of which were charged with custodial felonies, 5 were charged with summonses, misdemeanors. We have 8 pending investigations that we're waiting on lab analysis to confirm who possessed which guns. We executed 18 search warrants at various locations directly related to this gunfire. And we seized 30 firearms. People were charged with carrying a concealed weapon, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, public discharge of a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school, possession of a firearm while in possession of a Schedule 1 or 2 narcotic, and reckless handling of a firearm. Here's some of the examples of the guns that we actually seized. As you can see, many of these, there were multiple guns when we executed these warrants. And all these guns are at the lab being tested. And we are just really happy with the results of this case. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback during these search warrants. And in that our community felt like we listened to them on this specific topic. So I also want to announce an operation as we prepare for the spring called Spring Forward. This is an operation that I've discussed with the Mayor's Office of Gun Violence Prevention, other city partners, law enforcement partners, community members such as Next Up, and what we're going to be doing during spring break this year, the RPS spring break from March 27th through April 5th is focusing like a laser those 10 days to ensure that our children are safe. And there's a very good reason for that. As many of you know, we in the Richmond Police Department are obsessed with data, looking at the trends and patterns, and we found a disturbing trend over the last several years. So here's some data that we'll make available to all of you. Juveniles and young adults being shot specifically during spring break for RPS. And those dates sometimes differ, so we had our analysts look at those weeks, those 10-day periods, the Friday before and the Sunday leading up to the kids going back to school. And you can just see the numbers. So here we see between juveniles under the age of 17, 11 of them were shot, 5 were killed, 4 non-fatally, and 2 were accidentally shot. When you extend those numbers to the individuals who are young adults between 18 and 24, the numbers are even bigger. So 6 murders, 7 non-fatal shootings, 3 accidental shootings for a total of 16. So this is something that we noticed, and we want to be really intentional about that going forward. So part of that intentionality is working with our law enforcement partners. Part of it, and I'll bring Greg Hopkins up to talk about some of the things that we plan as a city to provide safe spaces for our kids during these 10 days. But part of it also is reaching out to family members, parents, loved ones of young adults to understand the risks that we're seeing. And one of the things that I want to highlight, we always talk about looking on social media for disputes going back and forth between your kids, and you should be monitoring their social media platforms. Something else that we're seeing, and it's not just in Richmond, it's in the surrounding counties too, is adults or other parents who are renting short-term rentals for these kids to have pop-up parties. They're incredibly dangerous. These pop-up parties are showing up, whether it's at a short-term rental, at a public park, or at another location that has large groups of kids who don't necessarily even know each other showing up to these events. And inevitably, the police are caught off guard because we don't know about all these, and fights ensue and gunfire ensues. So something I want to just caution our parents and caregivers to look for that. Don't rent hotel rooms or short-term rentals for your kids to have a party if you're not going to be there and chaperone, because this is the result. This is what we're seeing. So, Greg, I'd like to bring him up, and he's going to talk to you about some of the other things that we're going to do for our kids during this time period.
All right. Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Good morning. I can advance this right here, Chief, right? Cool. All right. Again, my name is Greg Hopkins. I'm the Director of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention here in the City of Richmond. Also serving as the Interim Director of the Department of Justice Services as well. Spring Forward, let's talk about it. This is advancing the Mayor's Thriving Neighborhoods pillar while prioritizing youth safety and community healing. Together, we believe Spring Forward represents a coordinated public safety and prevention strategy combining visibility, partnership, and upstream prevention during our high-risk activity months and periods. Spring Forward is centered in promoting peace, encouraging positive youth engagement, and investing in safe, structured activities during spring break, creating meaningful opportunities for young people. As the Chief said, this is something that we started this process back before the holidays. We know that Saturday is critical with our youth on spring break, but we want to occupy that time to make sure that these kids have some what we call valuable time opportunity to get into some pro-social skill activity. So let's talk about what we got going on this week. As I mentioned, this is a Saturday event. The Office of Gun Violence Prevention also has an opportunity to have what we call a steering committee. In that steering committee, we have internal partners, which is Parks and Rec, Office of Community Wealth Building, as well as Department of Social Services. But we do have external programming partners that provide programming. As Chief mentioned, Next Up RVA is one of those partners. They provide opportunities for kids for the out of school time. We got 13 placements across the city. They also what we call have a program locator on their website, nextuprva.org. Richmond Police Department, as well as our Office of Children and Families at the City of Richmond Redevelopment and Housing, Neighborhood Community Services, Community and Schools. All these partners are putting together, and we say, hey, look, we're going to put together something valuable here for the City of Richmond, especially for our young folk. So let's talk about some of the things that we currently got confirmed. As I mentioned earlier, this is a 7-day stretch from Saturday to Saturday. Right now, we're in the process of planning these programs out. First of the week, we're starting off with mini camps. That's with RPD and Department of Parks and Rec. We also have the Armstrong Creighton Renaissance program. That's a spring break fest. We're doing mini camps in all 6 RRHA sites. We Matter RVA is having school camps throughout the week. And we got something for our adults. That's Bingo Beats and Safe Streets. That's going to be Wednesday night. And that's actually going to start in February, but we'll have that series going all the way up to March. And then the Trauma Healing Response Network will be kicking off their pull-ups for peace opportunities in all neighborhoods across the city. This is just confirmed activities now. We starting now. It's 29 days in the first of the year. We want to make sure we bring all partners to the table. Starting about in the middle of February, you'll see a full calendar of events. From, again, Saturday to Saturday, having a big cookout or field day and Saturdays in all our neighborhoods, either on south of the river or north of the river. One thing that we added this year that we haven't really stayed focused on, if you see right here, the Office of Gun Violence Prevention and Department of Justice Services, we're going to do a camp in our juvenile detention center. Majority of those kids that are in there are pre-D, meaning that they're going to get out within 10 to 25 days. And they are high-risk kids. And so this is our Speak Up, Let's Talk opportunity where we bring community partners into the facility to talk to our kids before they get out for the summertime. We want to make sure everybody's prepared to have a safe and responsible summer, all right? Springing forward, let's talk about what's going to be next. We're not going to stop with spring break. We got Youth Violence Prevention Week coming up April 27th through May 1st. We are focusing on those 4 areas, what we call emphasize engagement and early intervention for prevention for youth. That week will be full with activities in partnership with Richmond Public Schools. And lastly, we have National Gun Violence Prevention Month coming up in June. That's going to be a month of activities as well to promote and prevent gun violence, raise awareness, honor and remember victims and survivors of gun violence, as well as supporting and uplifting our community-based partners here in the city of Richmond. But any information you need, you can contact me here. If there's any partners that want to step up and going to the table, please give me a shout, and we'll be more than happy to bring folks to the table to help out with Spring Forward.
Yep.
All right.
So I think when we talk affirmatively about things like this, cops are a little superstitious. Like nobody wants to talk about, hey, we could have these murders or these shootings occurring ahead of time, but you can't solve a problem if you don't admit you have one. And I just remember what it was like in spring break last year, standing on a scene in Gilpin Court where a 15-year-old girl was murdered by another juvenile. So we have to do better, and we as a city and all of our partners, from the nonprofit side to other agencies, are looking to address this problem forthrightly. Another update I'll give you is on Operation Vaporize. So we had a press conference in December. This was pushing a boulder up a hill. It was a lot of work that's been done, but I'd like to give an update on some of the things that we were unable to confirm, or just kind of update you since December what we've been doing. We've been continuing to work on this very specific challenge. This is another thing that, again, I hear from community members, from all of the 8 council districts. I'm quite sure they get calls. The mayor's office gets calls about vape shops, wanting them to abide by the law and follow policy, and we're committed to doing that. So I mentioned last time about RPD's criminal investigations, so that hasn't changed. The second tier, though, the city inspections with the city's code enforcement team, is what we've been doing. So we're tracking 97 total vape shops in Richmond. 55 have been inspected. 32 have been closed or placarded, and I think 3 or 4 have reopened. Is that right, John? 4? Okay, so 4 have currently reopened after fixing whatever problems they found. But 587 violations were noted in these inspections, which is obviously significant. I also have an update on a tactic that Deputy Chief El-Amin brought to our attention about utilizing the blight code, so drug blight codes, to try to address these vape shops. Every vape shop we're investigating, almost all of them are selling some kind of narcotics, usually marijuana, but often additional drugs like mushrooms and some others. So we looked at utilizing the blight ordinance, and it was pretty successful. So it's a very laborious pattern that takes, I have to, as chief of police, write an affidavit to the building inspector. So we did that in this case, for this specific case. So Pop Smoke Shop at 2501 Chamberlain Avenue. This is how it looked before. You can see everything there. We met with the owner. So Deputy Chief El-Amin, Director Bridges met with the owner of the building itself, not the business owner, and informed him of the drugs that we found, the firearms that were recovered, the series of controlled drug buys we made at this location. I put in an affidavit. We met with him, and he was surprised by it. He was unaware that this was happening in his business and took action. He had 30 days to abate it. It didn't even take him 30 days. So you can see this is how it looked before. This is how, if you drive by, it looks now. It's cleared out, and they will have another tenant in there. So while this is, like I said, it's not appropriate for every case, it is a tool in our toolbox to try to ensure that every business, including the vape shops, are abiding by not only the law but city code. All right, let's talk about crime. So this is the highlight, I would say. So we're down in major crimes 12%. So last year we had 10,265. This year we had 9,037, which the 10-year average is a little over 9,700. And major crimes include violent and property crimes, to include murder, non-negligent homicide, or non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, arson, burglary, larceny, and auto theft, and all the ancillary different criteria within those crimes. So again, as many of you are aware, we're flat on murder from last year. So we had 54 murders this year, 54 murders last year. That is tied for the lowest in 8 years. So I think, while 54 is 54 way too many, it is, when you look at the scope of what we dealt with in the past, is progress. Where we really saw a benefit was our non-fatal shooting reductions. This is an indicator in overall gun violence. If you look at the difference between a murder and a non-fatal shooting, the intent on the actor is almost exactly the same. Very few people in Richmond intend to shoot someone in the pinky toe. It is an attempted murder in almost every incident. And it's just the luck of the angle of the wound or the skill of one of the surgeons at our great hospitals that save people's lives. So this is a great indicator too. And it's the lowest in over 10 years. So since 2015 was the last time we had a lower number of non-fatal shootings. The robbery individuals are down, robbery residents are way down, carjackings way down, aggravated assaults are flat, rapes are way down. Where we're struggling specifically with crime is robbery commercial, and I'm going to talk about that in depth as to why we think that number is high. And then I also want to talk about, and it's something I brought up at the last press conference, a significant category increase in domestic violence, aggravated assault domestic violence. And we'll talk about why that number, 113% increase, and we'll explain it. But it drives our crime, as you can see. So aggravated assault domestic, let's talk about that. So when I think of this, this was the first year that our number 2 motive for murder is domestic assaults or domestic rivalries. And these are going up. Part of it is a reporting change. So now we take the report. If you grab a domestic partner's neck, whether you asphyxiate them and they lose consciousness or not, we are counting that as an aggravated domestic assault. And that is leading to an increase in reports. And while I don't like the statistic for our numbers, I do like the change because it shows the value and the importance of tracking those chokings, because that is the biggest indicator for when domestic violence increases from simple assault to aggravated assault and ultimately to murder. The stats are unequivocal with that. So we're taking that seriously and making that change in our reporting strategy, and it's showing in our numbers. And as you can see, though, this is a good chart. So thank you, Megan, for creating this for me, because it helps my mind make sense of it. So looking back from 2020, you can see the total. There's two types of domestic assault: simple assault and aggravated assault. And when you look at the totals are very similar. There's not a great increase. What the increase is going from, it used to be the aggravated assaults would be between 8 and 9% of the total number. This year, it's 16% of all domestic assaults are felonies, so aggravated assaults. And that is a reporting issue, but it's also a trend we're seeing, and we want to address it, and we're taking different steps to try to work on that for 2026. We have our goals every year. We look at where we need to improve. Last year, we wanted to improve in property crime, and we really did. This year, we're going to focus on domestic assaults and taking those cases very seriously and providing all the evidence needed to be successful in court. The other violent crime that's up is commercial robberies. And you can look at our heat map here and see where they're occurring. The number one store that's been robbed is 7-Eleven, but I want to talk about that because 7-Eleven is actually, most 7-Elevens are designed with SEPTEN in mind. They're really well designed to thwart commercial robberies, but what we're seeing, and this is why we're seeing an increase, is shopliftings that escalate to robberies. So how does a shoplifting turn into a robbery? Well, in two cases, someone walked in to steal a hot dog that's at a 7-Eleven, and when the clerk or someone else intervenes, either the threat of force or the actual use of force turns that into a very serious commercial robbery. So almost a third of all these commercial robberies start out as shoplifting, and someone intervenes, and because of the behavior of the thief, it turns into a felony robbery, which is really challenging. 28%, and this is another indicator on why we think this is up. The proliferation of vape shops in our city. We talk about the vape shops negatively sometimes about them not following the law, but they're also becoming victims of crime. So nearly 30% of all of our commercial robberies are driven by vape shop robberies, and those are almost never shopliftings that escalate. Those are takeover-style robberies that we are lucky didn't escalate to real gun violence. These are masked men going into these vape shops with high-powered rifles and proning the clerks out on the floor, zip-tying them in some cases, and we're just lucky that it has not led to a serious murders. So, these are what's driving our crime. These two specific crimes in the violent sphere. So I always like to compare Richmond to Richmond. This is an important stat, looking at our murder threshold dating back to 2015. So you can see, obviously, we're down from, we're the lowest since 2018 when we had 53. But when you compare us to where we were in 2021 with 90 murders, that's a 40% reduction. So that is very good work that our detectives have done and that our officers have done to lower that specific murder rate. So the average is 61 over 10 years. Again, 54 is 54 too many, but we are making progress. Let's talk about our murder clearance rate. So last year with this is a perfect comparison. So we had 54 murders versus 54 murders. And I'd like to talk about the clearance rates. Sometimes there's some confusion. We have till the last day of the year to clear a case. If it's not cleared in that calendar year and we clear it a day later or a week later, it doesn't go on those stats. But we're allowed to count it for the next year's stats, which sometimes get some confusion. So the year-to-date clearance rate is higher than last year. So 64% of all cases last year, or actually 65 if we round up, were solved within the calendar year. But because of prior clearances, we're up nearly 80% clearance rate for the year for the IBR clearance rate. And similar stats from last year, except we did a little bit better. In many of these cases, we don't clear a case if we have a warrant on a suspect but they haven't been picked up. We don't clear a case if we know who did it, but we're just waiting to get a charge for technical reasons. So these cases are even better than this clearance rate's even better than what I'm alluding to. And as you can see, this is the first year where the second highest motive is domestic assault. So arguments are always the highest number of murders. That's what and it's consistent with shootings. So individuals who either know each other or don't know each other and are armed, and it starts a verbal argument that leads in gunfire is the number one motive, and that's what we continue to see. This year, what we're seeing not only is direct domestic intimate partner violence, which is certainly a concern, but we're also seeing a disturbing trend of romantic rivals who are shooting each other and killing each other, and that's the motive for these murders. So something we're going to continue to work on. Here's just a series of our non-fatal shootings. Again, down 15% from last year, but look at where we were in 2022, 257 non-fatal shootings. So 171 non-fatal shootings is the lowest in 10 years, and like I said, those are real numbers. Those are real people who are not impacted by gun violence. And when you combine the two, all persons shot, that's a stat that we like to keep because it makes sense, because as I've mentioned, the intent is almost always the same. So when you combine gun-related murders and non-fatal shootings, the average is 268. We had 221 this year, but you can just really see where that is trending in the right direction in a way that because sometimes we've seen where we've had just kind of luck, where our non-fatal shootings are high, but our murders are lower, so more people survive. Sometimes the murders are high, but the non-fatal shootings are a bit lower. This is a better indicator that we think, and I think we're the only police department that really looks at the data this way. But we want to know about the murders, we want to know about the non-fatal shootings, but a real good indicator of gun violence is when we combine the two and take off some of the murders that are almost a different thing. So sometimes we have murders involving, unfortunately, child abuse that count as murders. That is a different type of crime than gun violence. So this is just gun violence, and it's a good indicator of where we stand. I always talk about our hotspots. So we have consolidated after 6 months review of our data and put some of these addresses are the same, but I want to show you. So the hotspots are marked on this map with the stars. You can also see where the gun violence is occurring in our city based upon the heat maps. So the heat maps are bright yellow in some of these spots, and that's where we're sending our officers. So not only are we doing focusing our investigative work there, we have our deterrent strategy there as well. So with the goal of continuing to reduce gun violence in these specific areas of our city. And we post these addresses. We have our officers focus on these addresses. Our investigators who have gun violence investigations focus on these locations. And we also surge resources. When we're talking about what we're going to do with Spring Forward, many of these locations are going to be highlighted by us and our partners in the nonprofit space and other city entities, because this is where we can have the most impact on gun violence. These addresses are very sticky. They year in and year out. If I were doing this briefing 30 years ago, some of these addresses would still be on this list. Let's talk about firearm seizures. So, the machine gun conversion devices. There's a certain gun manufacturer that doesn't like when I use their name when I talk about this, so we're going to stick with this, the machine gun conversion devices. So in 2023, we seized 18. Last year, we seized 8. In 2025, we seized about 22 that were on guns. And then we had a very specific investigation where we intervened in someone that had purchased these devices, and we found 26 in one batch. So we took them all in one batch in one criminal investigation. And these are devices that are incredibly deadly, put our officers at risk. The officer that was shot last year in his bullet-resistant material was shot with a device like this on a weapon that hit him through the door. I'd like to talk about the total firearms seized. Since 2019, you can see it ticking up. For the last 3 years, we've seized over 1,800 guns. I think this is an incredible, and those numbers don't actually mean something. So to just give you context, a city like New York, which is 30 times our size, 8 million people, their police department, which is, has 35,000 officers. Our officers are 607. They seized 5,200 guns, or 5,200 guns the whole year. We seized a third of that with a department that's a fraction of like 3%. So, just to give the scale of the amount of guns that our officers encounter, I think is really informational for me, because those numbers are just incredible, and it speaks to the work that our officers do every day to try to take dangerous guns off our streets. All right, we're going to transition to traffic fatalities. Obviously, this is a concern for many in our community. So in 2025, we had 22 fatal collisions, and the outlier was 13 of those. Over 50% were pedestrians that were struck and killed. And if you look at the data in 2024, we had 17, only 4 pedestrians. 2023, we were creeping up. That number has been lowering since 2022 with 28, but the pedestrian ratio has never been higher. And we talk about some of the things we're working on with Vision Zero and some of the challenges of intervening in these cases. And it is real. So we're encouraging people, while we're going to do our job to continue to investigate these crimes and enforce speeding and enforce other traffic laws like, driving with your cell phone or distracted driving, we're asking the public to be mindful. I can just tell you that these cases, these are numbers, but they're also people and family members who are missing their loved ones. And it's a tragedy that I think all of us have a part in trying to mitigate. Here's just some of the traffic fatalities. 17 of those, so 77% were on the high injury network. We know where many of the problems are. Some of those are with driver inattention. Some of them are with infrastructure issues that the city's working to address. So 13 of the incidents occurred south of the river, 59%. And when I talk about infrastructure, that's where I think a lot of that sometimes is lacking. We have growth in our city. We are having apartment buildings pop up across south of the river, and some of the infrastructure in place still needs to catch up to the population density in those areas, and we're working really diligently as a city to address it. 9 of those were north of the river. Safety camera program zone. So one thing, last year we mailed out over 100,000 citations for that. I am notifying folks today that we are moving one of the cameras from Westover Hills Elementary to Mary Mumford Elementary on Cary Street Road. That's being done because we just weren't seeing the summonses issued from that location. Part of it's an infrastructure issue where drivers, there's certainly traffic concerns around Westover Hills, but speeding directly isn't one of them. And the data bore that out. So we transitioned. We'll be moving that, and a keynote, we'll make everyone aware of that, but the keynote is once that goes into place, we have to have the 30-day grace period, so that will kick in. The first letters that citizens get for that will say that it's a warning, and then after that date, we'll start issuing actual citations. This is another technology that I want to make our community aware of, and the technology I just mentioned, which the speed cameras and the red light cameras that are getting ready to go online, possibly tomorrow, James, are we still good with that date?
Yes, weather permitting, so they're still up in the air.
Okay, so weather permitting, tomorrow we'll be having the 30-day grace period on these locations. So 25th Street and Main Street, Belvedere and Cary, Chamberlain and Brooklyn Park Boulevard, Chamberlain and Laburnum are going to have these devices, which are red light cameras. Now, I get a lot of questions about our technology, and this technology, I need to be clear, by statute cannot be used for any other crime investigation. So while the police officer and me would love to have some of this information to solve other crimes, we're barred from doing that. So whether it's the speed cameras or these red light cameras, we're unable to use that for any other investigation but for what they're intended. So just to be clear about that. And again, here's where all the red light cameras are going to go. So 5 north of the river, 5 south of the river. This is based on data, crash data, and these are the locations. Now let's talk about our property crime. So almost all good news here. I could go down to all of them, but really good news here. The one increase we have, we're flat on arson, down significantly on everything else, including the number one crime in Richmond, theft from motor vehicles, is again down 8%. But where we still continue to struggle is shoplifting. And I'm convinced that because of the proliferation of shoplifting, that's what's leading to frustration with our clerks. That's what's leading to frustration with community members that happen to be in stores and witness obvious shoplifting, and they intervene. And then as soon as you intervene, it turns into a commercial robbery. So I think that's what's driving it. So that number is the only one we're seeing up for property crime this year, and it's something that we continue to work with. Over 50% of those are at ABC stores, again, so it continues to be a challenge. Even though we're working with ABC, as many of you know, the number one store that was shoplifted last year was 1217 West Broad Street. So we met with ABC. We asked them to turn it into a package store, which apparently they hate doing. They did it for us, and we had one shoplifting there of all last year. And that was like the clerk had the bottle, we're getting ready to give it to him, and the guy just kind of snatched it. But that's one shoplifting. That was the number one spot. But what we found is that it's pushing like the balloon you squeeze, it's going to some of the other ABC stores. So it's not really solving the problem. So I think part of solving that problem is for us to continue to arrest the consistent violators, to use technology to arrest those individuals and bring the best case forward to court so that they can be held accountable. And the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and I see Ms. McKeechin here, thank you for coming, we're working very closely with them. So sometimes with a highly effective shoplifters, we're identifying them, and because of the law change, it used to be your third offense on a shoplifting, no matter what the cost was, it was a felony. That has changed. We can no longer enforce that, but what we're looking at doing is consolidating some of those numbers so we can get over the $1,000 limit. So if you shoplift 10 times $100, we can bring a felony, and the Commonwealth Attorney is helping us with that to look for those cases that meet that criteria. And then, of course, as I've said before, the law is a teacher, so holding people accountable in court will address some of that future behavior, which again I think is, while it's not like a violent crime, is still something that's very concerning to our business community. This is something I'm pleased to report. So I talked about all the guns that we're seizing, our officers are seizing. I think this number, looking from where we were, so we had a 13% reduction of guns being stolen out of cars. So theft from motor vehicle continues to be our number one report. And as you can see, in 2022, 626 were taken out of there. Last year, 472. Now, that's an improvement. I'm very pleased with the improvement, but that's still 472 guns that should not be on our street, should not be in the hands of juveniles, should not be in the hands of convicted felons that are. These people don't have to pass a background check. So we're continuing to ask our community to continue the good work of this, to lock up your guns, to secure them, to not leave. Your car is not a vault, so don't leave your guns under the seat of your car, because we've seen tragedy with that. We've seen very quick tragedy when people have left guns in their car and then those guns are used in crimes, even crimes against children. So again, Shockoe Bottom and Shockoe Slip are where these guns are largely being stolen, a little bit in city center as well. But it kind of flipped this year. So normally Shockoe Bottom is our number one hotspot for theft from motor vehicles involving firearms. This time it's Shockoe Slip, and that's probably because every weekend we have a bunch of cops in Shockoe Bottom, and I just think kind of like the shoplifting, we're pushing it to the other side of Shockoe Slip. But still, these two neighborhoods combined, you can just see the heat map. It's a non-issue for much of our city. It's folks coming to Shockoe Bottom and Shockoe Slip to engage in entertainment and bringing their guns to the city, and we're just continuing to ask people not to do that because these guns end up in the hands of criminals. I'd like to give an update on our recruiting. More good news with this. So as you can see, we used to routinely, before 2020, have over 1,000 applications for very few openings. So we'd have probably 30 openings a year. Now we have about 145 openings, 150 openings. And the applications used to be over 1,000. The last couple of years, they've been a little over 500. This year, it's trending in the right direction, over 700. But we're continuing to encourage people to consider our police department. If you want to be part of the solution, join the RPD. It'll be the adventure of a lifetime. Our recruiting director is right back there, Lieutenant Shane Waite. So if any of you know anyone that wants to be a Richmond cop, send them our way. And finally, we're going to do I like to compare Richmond to Richmond. And when we look back in 1994, Richmond saw the highest number of murders, and we were considered the murder capital of the country. So I was at University of Richmond in 1994. It didn't seem like that on my campus, but when I watched the news every night, I saw it. I saw blood on the streets, and I saw what it did to our city. The preceding dates, the population emptied out. So many of these years shortly after this, we were well under 200,000 residents, and we're building our city back slowly, and part of that is included with by public safety. So we saw 160 murders, 54 last year, 66% decrease in murders from that time in 1994. The rapes, 196, 35 this year, so a 79% decrease. This number is the biggest, or one of the biggest. So the robbery number, 1,500 robberies in that year, 266 this year, so an 83% decrease over what it was like in our city, the same city, this year. Aggravated assaults, 59% reduction. Burglaries, God, this is even bigger, 89% reduction in burglaries. Auto theft, 2,600 plus, 68% decrease for this year. Larcenies, well, it's a big number too, 40% reduction. So I say that because we're always trying to talk about the perception of crime. It's really important for us to share with our community what this city has been in the past and what it could be in the future if we don't all do our part to lower crime. That's what our city was like. And that is a city that's shrinking. And because of the work of the Richmond Police Department and certainly the work of everyone in our city to lower crime, our city's growing. You see apartment complex, you see cranes in the air. None of that happens without public safety.